Welcome to Sparks of History, where Jewish history and world history meet. We are extremely pleased to have with us today Rabbi Pinchas Landis. Rabbi Landis is an acclaimed motivational speaker, author, and educator. Rabbi Landis attended Near Israel Rabbinical College, or Sameyach Yeshiva, Yeshiva University, and Johns Hopkins University. Rabbi Landis serves as the director of Jewish Anytime, as you can see in the background, which is an online learning platform. He is also the director of Partners Cleveland, a nonprofit enterprise focused on inspiring the Jewish community in Ohio. Rabbi Landis's forthcoming book, Today in Jewish History, is soon to be released and published by Mosaica Press. And today we will be discussing the always compelling and fascinating broad topic of the history of Zionism. Rabbi Landis, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it very much.
Rabbi Lieberman, thank you for having me. It's really just a true pleasure to be here. I'm not sure how many people you had to go through till you got to me, because when I look at the other esteemed speakers you've had, Rabbi Wein and Rabbi Jacobson and Rabbi Spiro, I hardly consider myself equal to that list. So, but I do really thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to this topic. It's a topic I'm very passionate about, and I've been spending a lot of energy on lately. So, ready to dive right in when you are.
Okay. Again, thank you so much. Let's just go back. There's always a question of where do you start when discussing the history of Zionism. But let's start and look at the situation in the mid-1800s in what is now called the Old Yishuv. What is the state of the Old Yishuv?
Yeah, that's a great question, and as you really alluded to, it's like like with many topics, it's very hard to say when is the beginning. I think we can make an argument that the beginning of Zionism is when Hashem says to Avraham, "Lech lecha," go to Eretz Yisrael, or go to the land I'm going to show you. And to a certain extent, it's continued on from there in different ways, shapes and forms, with different strokes and in different ways. But I think the important thing, just to sort of give a 10-second soundbite for everything that came before the 1800s, is there was never a time period when Eretz Yisrael was Judenrein. In other words, there was never a time period when the land of Israel was free of Jews. The population definitely waxed and waned and went up and went down, and there were different rebellions, different high points and low points, depending on who was in charge. But in general, under Ottoman rule, the Jewish community had some high points and some low points. And kind of the 18th century, before we get to the 1800s, the 19th century was a low point, and sparked the beginning of a high point with the old Yishuv, as you referred to it, and that term, like any Jewish term, has it can be a complicated term, but we'll call it the Yishuv, what became the old Yishuv when the new Yishuv started. That starts in the mid 18th century with if we take a snapshot at that time, we've got about roughly 25,000 Jews in Israel that were a remnant of that influx that happened after the expulsion of Spanish Jewry. Mainly it's a Sephardic community, but the beginning of Ashkenazim is in the 18th century, and starts first with the Rabbi Yehuda Chassid and his disciples, and then the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, the disciples of the Vilna Gaon, and all those people come together to form what we now refer to as the old Yishuv. So we have a community in Israel that is predominantly centered, or at least the Jewish community is predominantly centered around the four holy cities. There's communities in Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim already has a majority Jewish population, and in the mid 1800s, we got about 10,000 Jews there, and about 5,000 Christians, about 5,000 Muslims. So you're already dealing with a majority Jewish population in Jerusalem. We have a community in Tzfas, we have a community in Hebron, and we have a community in Tiberia. Those are really the major Jewish communities. Akko also has a presence. According to many, that's where the Ramban is buried. According to many, that's where the Ramchal is buried. If he's not buried in Tiberia, which is a whole different discussion for a different time. But those are the major Jewish population centers. And I think what's important to kind of keep in mind when we're looking at this time period of the pre-Zionist world is, Israel was not a place where there was a lot going on, just period, by anyone's perspective. Everyone likes to look at Mark Twain's quotes from the time. Mark Twain took a visit to the land of Israel, and it's recorded in his own writings. He wrote a book on the topic. I just have one quote here in my notes where he says, the further we went, the hotter the sun got, and the more rocky and bare, repulsive and dreary the landscape became. There was hardly a tree or a shrubbery anywhere. Even the olives and the cactus, those fast friends of worthless soil, had almost deserted the country. And that's because the land of Israel was really just a backwater part of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans at this point were already referred to as the sick man in Europe. It was a decrepit, corrupt empire from a financial perspective, from a political perspective, from a socio-political perspective. This was after they had massacred the Armenians. Just say, it was not a great nation in any way, shape, or form. Really, almost from the death of Suleiman the Magnificent, a man definitely known for his modesty, and until this time, people were just waiting for it to fall apart, and it somehow survived for almost 400 years in really a decrepit state. But when we look at it, sort of, we as I said, there may be 25,000 Jews in the country before the beginning of the Zionist movement. There are only about 250,000 people, according to the most generous estimate. According to other estimates, the estimates range from 50,000 to 250,000. There weren't really censuses taken in the Ottoman Empire. So there could have been, if we go to the most conservative estimate, there could have been as little as 50,000 people in the land of Israel at that time, half of which are Jews. That's one estimate. And even if we go to the most liberal estimate, it's 250,000 people, of which about 10% is Jews. And now that's compared to in the year 1800, there's about 91 million Muslims in the world, and by the year 1900 there's about 200 million Muslims in the world. So if we say there's roughly 200,000 Muslims, if we go with the liberal estimate, living in the land of Israel in the mid 1800s, well, that's it's a fraction of a percent. It's 1% of the entirety of the Muslim world, so you get the sense of where this plays into the rest of the world. It's a backwater nothing, to say the least. But we're going to see, that in my humble opinion, and in the humble opinion of most Jewish historians, that really starts to change dramatically in the mid 19th century. And then that's really, your question was, what did the world look like before, in the mid 18th century, before the first Aliyah? And I think that's the snapshot.